The desert stretched endlessly under the blazing Arizona sun. A vast ocean of red sand and ancient rock formations that seemed to touch the sky. The year was 1882, and the frontier was still wild, untamed, and dangerous for those who dared to cross it alone. Jake Morrison rode his horse slowly through the canyon, his weathered hat pulled low over his eyes to shield them from the relentless heat. He was a drifter, a cowboy with no home to call his own, just a bedroll strapped to his saddle and a rifle across his back. His face was covered in dust, and his blue eyes scanned the landscape with the careful attention of a man who had learned to expect trouble. He had been traveling for 3 days without seeing another soul. The towns were far apart out here, and the land belonged more to the creatures and the native tribes than to any white settler. Jake didn't mind the solitude, in fact, he preferred it. People brought complications, and complications brought pain. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Jake heard something that made him pull his horse to a stop. It was faint at first, almost lost in the whisper of the desert wind, but his trained ears caught it, a sound that didn't belong, growling not just one animal but several, the deep, threatening snarls of predators circling their prey. Jake's hand instinctively moved to his rifle as he urged his horse forward. Following the sound around a cluster of large boulders, what he saw made his blood run cold. A young Apache girl, no more than 19 or 20 years old, was backed against a rock wall. Her dark eyes were fierce and unafraid, but her situation was desperate. 4 massive gray wolves circled her, their teeth bared, foam dripping from their jaws. They were clearly rabid, their movements erratic and aggressive. The girl held a broken spear in her hands. The shaft snapped in half, clearly from an earlier struggle. Her duskin dress was torn at the shoulder, and blood streaked down her arm. She had already wounded one of the wolves. It lay dead a few feet away. But the others were closing in for the kill. Jake didn't think. He couldn't. There was no time. He raised his rifle and fired. The crack of the gunshot echoed through the canyon like thunder. The first wolf dropped instantly, shot clean through the head. The other 3 turned toward him, their attention momentarily diverted from the girl. "Get back," Jake shouted, though he wasn't sure if she understood English. The wolves charged at him, their rabid minds focused only on attack. Jake's horse reared up, nearly throwing him, but he held firm. He fired again, taking down the second wolf mid-leap. The third one lunged at his horse's legs, and Jake had to swing the rifle like a club, connecting with the creature's skull with a sickening crunch. The fourth wolf, the largest of the pack, went straight for the girl again. She swung her broken spear, catching it across the snout. But the wolf was too crazed to feel pain. It knocked her to the ground, its jaws snapping inches from her throat. Jake leaped from his horse. Pulling his hunting knife from his belt, he ran forward and drove the blade deep into the wolf's side. The animal howled and turned on him, its teeth sinking into his forearm. Pain shot through Jake's arm, but he didn't let go. He twisted the knife and pushed harder until the wolf finally released him and collapsed. For a moment, there was only silence, broken by the sound of heavy breathing. Jake clutched his bleeding arm, feeling the warm blood seeping through his fingers. The girl slowly got to her feet, her dark eyes fixed on him with an expression he couldn't quite read. She was beautiful in a wild, untamed way. Her long black hair hung loose around her shoulders, and her bronze skin glowed in the fading sunlight. Her face was strong and proud, with high cheekbones and full lips. But it was her eyes that captured him. They were deep and intelligent, filled with a fire that suggested she feared nothing in this world. She walked toward him slowly, stepping over the dead wolves without a glance. When she reached him, she looked at his wounded arm. Then back up at his face, she said something in Apache, her voice melodic but firm. Jake shook his head, indicating he didn't understand. The girl reached out and gently took his injured arm in her hands, examining the bite marks. Then she looked directly into his eyes and spoke in broken but clear English. "You save Ayanna," she said, pointing to herself. "Now, you mind?" Jake blinked in confusion. "What?" She smiled slightly, a hint of amusement crossing her fierce features. "Apache way, you save life, you responsible, you mind now. Cowboy." Before Jake could protest or even fully understand what she meant, Ayanna tore a strip of fabric from her dress and began wrapping his wound with surprising gentleness. Her touch was careful, almost tender. Despite the strength he had just witnessed, Jake found himself unable to speak, staring at this mysterious Apache girl who had just claimed him as hers. He had ridden into this canyon as a free man, a drifter with no ties to anyone. But as the desert wind picked up and the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Jake Morrison realized that his life had just changed forever. The desert night fell quickly, wrapping the canyon in a blanket of darkness pierced only by countless stars overhead. Jake sat near a small fire that Ayanna had built with practiced efficiency, watching as she moved around the camp with the grace of someone who belonged to this harsh land. His arm throbbed where the wolf had bitten him, but Ayanna's bandage was holding. She had treated the wound with some kind of crushed plant mixture that stung at first, but now provided a cooling relief. He flexed his fingers, grateful that the beast hadn't severed any tendons. Ayanna sat across from him, her eyes reflecting the firelight like polished obsidian. She had been silent for the past hour, occasionally glancing at him with an expression that made Jake uncomfortable. It wasn't fear or gratitude, it was something else entirely. Something possessive. You got family nearby? Jake finally asked, breaking the silence. A village? People who are probably worried about you? Ayanna's jaw tightened. Village 2 days north, she said, her English halting but understandable. But Ayanna not go back. Not yet. Why not? She poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling into the night sky. Father want Ayanna marry Nietzsche, strong warrior. Good hunter. She spat the words out like they tasted bitter. But Nietzsche cruel, he beat his first wife until she die. Ayanna run away. Jake's eyes widened. You ran away from your own wedding? Ayanna choose own path, she said firmly, lifting her chin with defiance. Not property, not horse to be traded. There was a fire in her voice that Jake recognized. The same stubborn independence that had driven him away from his own family's ranch years ago. He understood wanting freedom more than safety, even if it meant living on the edge of survival. So what were you doing out here alone? He asked. This ain't exactly safe territory. As you just found out. Ayanna's expression softened slightly. Ayanna go to sacred place, ask spirits for guidance. She touched a leather pouch hanging around her neck. Grandmother tell Ayanna that spirits send sign. Show true path. Jake couldn't help but smirk. Well, I reckon getting attacked by rabid wolves is some kind of sign, though I'm not sure what it's supposed to mean. Sign clear, Ayanna said, looking directly at him with those intense dark eyes. Spirits send white cowboy to save Ayanna. This mean we connected. Fates tied together. Now hold on, Jake said, raising his good hand. I appreciate your beliefs and all, but I'm just a drifter passing through. I helped because it was the right thing to do, not because of some spiritual connection. Ayanna stood and walked around the fire toward him. Her movements were deliberate. Almost predatory, she crouched down beside him, so close he could smell the sage and smoke in her hair. You not understand Apache way, she said softly. When warriors save life, debt must be repaid. But more than debt, there is bond. Ayanna see your spirit when you fight wolves. You not hesitate, not think of own safety. You have brave heart, good heart. Jake felt his face flush, though whether from the fire's heat or her proximity, he couldn't tell. I'm nobody special. Just a cowboy who got lucky with a rifle. No, Ayanna said firmly, placing her hand over his heart. Ayanna see true you running from something? Same as Ayanna. You have pain in past, loneliness in present, but you still choose to save stranger. This make you special. Her words cut deeper than he expected. She was right, of course, he was running. Had been running for 3 years since his brother's death. A death he blamed himself for. He had drifted from town to town taking odd jobs, never staying long enough to form attachments, never allowing himself to care about anyone. My past ain't your concern, Jake said, his voice rougher than he intended. Ayanna didn't move, didn't flinch at his tone. Past make us who we are, but not who we become. She withdrew her hand and returned to her side of the fire. You free to leave when sun comes, Ayanna not hold prisoner. But know this, cowboy with sad eyes. You save Ayanna's life in Apache tradition. This mean Ayanna owe you protection, loyalty, and if you accept, companionship. I don't need any of those things, Jake said. But his voice lacked conviction. Maybe not need, Ayanna replied, a slight smile playing on her lips. But maybe want, deep inside where you hide feelings. Jake opened his mouth to argue but found he had no words. This Apache girl, barely more than a stranger, had somehow seen through all his carefully built walls in a matter of hours. The fire crackled between them, and in the distance a coyote howled at the moon. Jake pulled his blanket tighter around his shoulders and lay back, staring up at the infinite stars. Tomorrow he would ride away, he told himself. Tomorrow he would leave this strange, fierce girl behind and continue his solitary journey. It was safer that way for both of them, but as sleep finally claimed him, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that his tomorrow had already been decided by forces he didn't understand, and that the Apache girl watching over him from across the fire had become something he couldn't simply ride away from. Dawn broke over the canyon with fingers of gold and crimson light, painting the rock walls in colors that seemed almost unnatural in their beauty. Jake woke to the smell of roasting meat and the sound of Ayanna singing softly in her native tongue. A melody both haunting and strangely comforting. He sat up, his arm still sore but significantly better than the night before. Whatever medicine she had used was working. Ayanna looked over at him, her expression unreadable, and gestured toward a flat rock where she had placed some cooked rabbit meat and what looked like flatbread. "Eat," she commanded. "Long journey ahead," Jake frowned as he moved toward the food. "Journey? I thought we were parting ways this morning." Ayanna shook her head. "Cowboy not listen good. Ayanna tell you last night we connected now. Besides," she added with a slight smirk, "you think Ayanna let you wander desert with wounded arm? You get infection, die in 3 days, maybe 4. "I've survived worse," Jake muttered, but he accepted the food. His stomach had been growling since he woke up. "Yes, Ayanna sees scars," she said. Sitting beside him, "You are fighter, survivor. But even strong wolf need pack sometimes." As they ate in silence, Jake found himself studying her more carefully in the morning light. She was younger than he'd first thought, probably no more than 20. But there was an ancient wisdom in her eyes that suggested she had lived through experiences that aged the soul. Her hands were calloused and strong, the hands of someone who knew hard work and harder choices. "Why are you really doing this?" Jake asked finally. "The truth, not the spiritual stuff." Ayanna was quiet for a long moment, chewing thoughtfully. When she spoke, her voice was softer than before. "Ayanna tell you about Nige, the warrior father choose. But Ayanna not tell you everything," she paused, gathering her thoughts. 2 moons ago, Ayanna had sister, younger only 15 summers. She was promised to different warrior. Old man with 3 wives already, sister not want this, she try to run. Like Ayanna, Jake's chest tightened, sensing where the story was going. "They find her before she reached Sacred Mountains," Ayanna continued, her voice now hollow. "They bring her back. Beat her for dishonoring family. Force marriage anyway. 3 weeks later, sister hang herself from tree near river. Ayanna find her body." "Jesus," Jake breathed. Ayanna's eyes glistened, but no tears fell. "Ayanna make vow that day at sister's grave. Vow that Ayanna never let anyone decide Ayanna's path. That Ayanna choose own destiny even if it mean death." She looked directly at him. "Then yesterday, spirit's answer. Send white cowboy who fight wolves without fear. Who risk life for stranger. This tell Ayanna that freedom possible. That choice possible." Jake felt the weight of her words settle over him like a physical thing. He understood now. He wasn't just a man who had saved her life. He was a symbol, proof that she could forge her own path. "I can't be your salvation," Jake said quietly. "I'm just a broken man running from ghosts." "Ayanna not ask you to be salvation," she replied. "Ayanna ask you to be companion? 2 people running together stronger than 1 person running alone?" Before Jake could respond, Ayanna stood and walked to her small bundle of belongings. She pulled out a thin leather cord threaded with turquoise beads and a small carved stone in the shape of a wolf. "In Apache tradition," she began, walking back to him, "when life debt is created, saved person must offer token symbol of bond." She held out the necklace. This belonged to Ayanna's grandmother. Most precious thing Ayanna owned. Grandmother was medicine woman, very wise, very strong. She teach Ayanna that true strength come from knowing when to fight and when to trust. Jake stared at the offered necklace. "I can't take that, it's too valuable." "You must," Ayanna insisted. "In Apache way, if you refuse gift, you refuse bond." "You say Ayanna's life not worth saving." "That's not what I meant, then accept," she interrupted, stepping closer. "Wear this and Ayanna will know you understand. You not have to love Ayanna, not have to stay forever, but acknowledge that our paths meant to cross, that we help each other, at least for now." Jake looked into her eyes and saw the desperation hidden beneath her proud exterior. She wasn't just asking him to accept a necklace. She was asking him to acknowledge that she mattered, that her choice to trust him meant something. With trembling fingers, Jake took the necklace and placed it over his head. The turquoise beads were cool against his skin, and the wolf stone rested just above his heart. Ayana's face broke into a genuine smile. The first he had seen from her, it transformed her completely, making her look younger, almost girlish. She placed her hand over the wolf stone, pressing it against his chest. "Now we bound," she said softly. "Not by law of white man or tradition of Apache, but by choice, by respect, by understanding that we both seek same thing, freedom." She leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his, a gesture so intimate and unexpected that Jake froze. He could feel her breath against his face, smell the sage and smoke and something uniquely her. "Ayana yours," she whispered, "and you mine. Until we choose different path." When she pulled back, Jake found he couldn't speak. Something had shifted between them. Something profound and terrifying. He was no longer just a drifter, and she was no longer just a girl he had saved. They were bound now by forces he didn't fully understand. And as the sun climbed higher in the desert sky, Jake realized he wasn't sure he wanted to understand. He only knew that riding away alone was no longer an option his heart would allow. They rode together through the canyon, Jake on his horse and Ayana seated behind him, her arms wrapped around his waist with a familiarity that made him both uncomfortable and strangely content. She had insisted they head west, away from her village and away from the nearest town, toward a place she called the Valley of Painted Rocks. Why there? Jake had asked that morning as they prepared to leave. "Safe place," Ayana had replied. "Old Apache refuge, no one go there anymore. Bad spirits, they say, but Ayana, no truth. Just stories to keep people away. We rest there, plan next move." Now, as they traveled, Jake found himself acutely aware of her presence behind him. The way she leaned into him when the horse climbed steep paths, the sound of her breathing, the occasional touch of her hair against his neck when the wind blew. "You never tell Ayana your name," she said suddenly. Breaking hours of silence, Jake hesitated. Names had power. Giving his name felt like giving away another piece of himself. "Jake," he finally said. "Jake Morrison." "Jake," she repeated, testing the sound. "Short, strong, like you." She was quiet for a moment, then added, "What you running from, Jake Morrison?" "Who says I'm running from anything?" "Ayana say," she replied. "Ayana see it in way you look behind when you think no one watching. In way you sleep with hand on gun. In sadness that live in your eyes even when you smile." Jake's jaw tightened. "You see too much? Maybe you hide too little," she countered gently. They rode in silence for several more minutes before Jake spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I had a brother, younger brother named Daniel. He looked up to me, followed me everywhere, wanted to be just like me." Jake paused, the memories flooding back with painful clarity. 3 years ago, we were working a cattle drive together. I was supposed to be watching him, teaching him the ropes, but I got distracted. Started drinking with some of the other cowboys, telling stories, being stupid. Ayana's arms tightened slightly around him, encouraging him to continue. Daniel wandered off during the night, probably looking for me. There was a stampede. Cattle got spooked by lightning. He got caught in it. Jake's voice cracked. By the time we found him, it was too late. He was only 17. My parents never forgave me. Hell, I never forgave myself. "So you run," Ayana said softly. "You punish yourself by being alone, by not letting anyone close." "I don't deserve to be close to anyone," Jake said bitterly. "Everyone I care about ends up hurt." Ayana was silent for a long moment. Then she did something unexpected. She pressed her cheek against his back, right between his shoulder blades, and held him tighter. "Jake carry heavy burden," she said. "But burden not his alone. Brother made choice to wander. Cattle made choice to stampede. Lightning made choice to strike. Jake just man, not God. Cannot control everything. I was supposed to protect him. And Ayana supposed to save sister." Ayana replied, her voice thick with emotion. "But sister choose death over slavery. Ayana not there to stop her. Carry guilt every day. But grandmother teach Ayana something before she die. She say we not responsible for other people's journey, only our own. We can walk beside them, support them, love them, but we cannot live their life for them." Jake felt something break inside him, a wall he had carefully constructed brick by brick over 3 years. He blinked rapidly, refusing to let tears fall. "How do you let go of the guilt?" he asked hoarsely. "You don't," Ayana said honestly. "You carry it, but you not let it carry you. You honor memory by living, by being better, By protecting others when you can. She paused, then added, like you protect Ayana from wolves. They reached a narrow pass between two towering rock formations, and Jake guided the horse through carefully on the other side. The landscape opened into a small valley, dotted with massive boulders covered in ancient petroglyphs, paintings of animals, hunters, spirits, and symbols Jake couldn't begin to understand. Valley of Painted Rocks, Ayana announced, sliding off the horse with practiced ease. We camp here tonight. As they set up camp near a small spring, Jake found himself watching Ayana work. She moved with purpose and grace, gathering firewood, preparing a space for sleeping, setting out her meager supplies. She caught him staring and smiled. What Jake think about? I'm thinking, he said slowly, that maybe I've been running in the wrong direction. Ayana walked over to him and took his hands in hers. Her touch was warm and grounding. Maybe, she said. Or maybe you run exactly right direction. Bring you here to this moment to Ayana. You really believe that? That this was all meant to happen? Ayana believe we all find what we need when we're ready to receive it, she replied. Jake need to remember how to feel, how to let someone in. Ayana need to remember she not alone. That bravery not just about running away, but running toward something too. She reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. We heal together, yes? You teach Ayana about white man's world. Ayana teach you about letting go. Jake covered her hand with his own. I don't know how to do this. Do what? Trust, he admitted. Care about someone again. I'm terrified I'll fail you like I failed Daniel. Ayana stepped closer, closing the distance between them until there was barely a breath of space. Then we be terrified together, she whispered. Fear mean we care, mean we try. This good thing, Jake. Brave thing. As the sun set over the valley of painted rocks, casting long shadows across the ancient paintings, Jake Morrison made a decision. He would stop running from his past. He would stop punishing himself with loneliness. He would take the risk of caring again, even if it destroyed him. Because standing before him was a fierce Apache girl who had chosen him, who saw his brokenness and didn't turn away, who offered him something he thought he had lost forever, hope. 3 days passed in the Valley of Painted Rocks, 3 days that felt like stepping outside of time itself. Jake and Ayana fell into a rhythm that felt natural despite their different worlds. She taught him Apache words and showed him how to read signs in the desert that he had never noticed before. The way certain birds indicated water nearby, how to identify which plants could heal and which could kill, the meaning behind the ancient symbols painted on the rocks. In turn, Jake shared stories of the towns he had drifted through, the people he had met, the changing world beyond the desert. He taught her how to handle his rifle properly, though she proved to be a natural shot, her hunting skills translating perfectly to the firearm. But on the morning of the 4th day, everything changed. Jake woke to find Ayana already up, standing at the edge of their camp, staring toward the eastern pass with her body rigid and alert. He grabbed his rifle and moved beside her. What is it? Riders, she said quietly. Coming from direction of my village. Maybe 5, maybe 6. Jake's stomach dropped. Your father's men? Ayana nodded slowly, her expression grim. They track Ayana, probably track since she run away. Naiche not accept rejection. He want what he believe is his. How long do we have? They reach valley by midday, Ayana calculated. Maybe sooner if they push horses hard. Jake's mind raced. We need to move, pack up, and head deeper west. But Ayana shook her head. They track Ayana anywhere. Apache best trackers in world, running only delay, not solve. Then what do you suggest? Ayana turned to face him, her dark eyes filled with a resolve that was both admirable and terrifying. Ayana faced them. Tell father and Naiche that Ayana choose different path. That Ayana belonged to white cowboy now, not to warrior who beat wives. That's insane, Jake protested. They'll kill me and drag you back by force. Not if we stand together, Ayana insisted. Not if we show we united strong in Apache culture. If woman claim man and man accept. Bond very powerful, even father must respect this. Even if he not like, and if he doesn't respect it? Ayana's hand moved to the knife at her belt. Then we fight, Jake wanted to argue. Wanted to convince her that running was the smarter option. But he saw the determination in her face and knew that this was her battle to fight, her moment to claim her freedom, not through escape but through confrontation. All right, he said finally. We face them together, but we do it smart. We position ourselves near that rock formation. He pointed to a cluster of boulders that would provide cover. And we make it clear we're not backing down. Ayana smiled. A fierce warrior's smile. You learn Apache way quick. Jake Morrison. They spent the next few hours preparing. Jake checked his rifle and pistol, making sure both were loaded and ready. Ayana sharpened her knife and gathered several rocks that could be thrown as weapons if needed. They moved their position to the defensive spot Jake had identified, a place where they could see anyone approaching, but would be difficult to flank. As the sun climbed toward its peak, they spotted the dust cloud rising in the distance. The riders were coming, and there was no turning back now. 6 Apache warriors emerged from the eastern pass. Riding hard and fast, at their head was a man who could only be Nietzsche. Tall and powerfully built, with a face marked by old battle scars and eyes that burned with rage. Beside him rode an older man, gray-haired but still strong, wearing the decorative leather vest of a tribal elder, Ayana's father. The warriors spotted their camp and rode straight toward them, surrounding the rock formation in a loose circle. Nietzsche dismounted first, his hand already on his war club, his expression one of barely contained fury. Ayana's father dismounted more slowly, his weathered face unreadable when he spoke. His voice carried the weight of authority and disappointment. He said something in rapid Apache, his tone harsh and demanding. Ayana responded in the same language, her voice equally strong, not yielding an inch. The exchange continued for several moments, growing more heated with each sentence. Finally, Ayana's father switched to English, clearly for Jake's benefit. My daughter brings shame to family, he said, his accent thick but his words clear. She run from sacred duty, from promise made. Now she stand with white man stranger who know nothing of our ways. This white man save your daughter's life, Jake said, keeping his voice steady despite the rifles pointed at him. She would have died torn apart by rabid wolves if I hadn't been there. Nietzsche spat on the ground. Then White Dog should have let her die with honor instead of dishonor. He spoke in broken English, each word dripping with venom. Woman belonged to me. Promise made, payment given, she is my property. Ayana not property. Ayana shouted, stepping forward. Ayana is free woman. Make own choice. Choose this man, she gestured to Jake. He show Ayana what real warrior look like. Not man who beat women. Not man who take without giving. Real warrior protect. Hot control. Nietzsche's face twisted with rage. He took a step forward, raising his war club. I take what is mine. Jake raised his rifle in one smooth motion, pointing it directly at Nietzsche's chest. You take one more step, and it'll be your last. His voice was cold. The voice of a man who had nothing left to lose. The other warriors immediately raised their weapons, creating a standoff that could explode into violence at any second. Ayana's father raised his hand, commanding silence. His eyes moved between his daughter, Jake and Nietzsche, calculating, assessing. Finally he spoke, his voice grave. If daughter choose white man, he said slowly, she must prove bond is real, not just words to escape duty. In Apache tradition there is test. Challenge that prove commitment. Ayana and Jake exchanged glances. What kind of test? Jake asked carefully. The old man's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Trial of blood and spirit. 3 challenges. If you both survive, if you prove bond is strong, then Ayana free to choose own path. He paused, his eyes hardening. But if you fail, daughter return to Nietzsche, and white man leave desert. Never return. Jake felt Ayana's hand slip into his. Her grip tight and certain. We accept, they said together. The Valley of Painted Rocks became an arena, a sacred space where ancient traditions would determine the fate of 2 people who dared to choose their own destiny. Ayana's father, whose name Jake learned was Cocheta, meaning the unknown, dismounted fully and began drawing symbols in the sand with a ceremonial staff. The other warriors formed a circle around them, their weapons lowered but their eyes watchful. Nietzsche stood apart from the group, his muscular arms crossed over his chest, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. He occasionally spat words, in Apache, that made the other warriors shift uncomfortably. Cocheta finished his drawing and turned to face Jake and Ayana. 3 challenges, he announced, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. First challenge, test strength of body. Second challenge, test wisdom of mind. Third challenge, test truth of heart. What happens if we pass? Ayana asked, her voice steady despite the tension. You free? Cocheta replied simply. No Apache will claim you. No tradition will bind you. You walk your own path. And if we fail? Jake pressed. The old man's expression darkened. Then spirits have spoken. Bond not true, not strong enough to break sacred vow. He looked directly at his daughter. And you return to duty, to family, to Nietzsche. Ayana squeezed Jake's hand tighter but said nothing. We're ready, Jake declared. Though his heart hammered against his ribs, Cocheta nodded and gestured to Nietzsche. First challenge, test of body. Nietzsche choose combat style. The scarred warrior stepped forward with a predatory grin. White man fight me, hand to hand, no weapons. We see if he's strong enough to protect Apache woman. He began removing his shirt, revealing a torso covered in battle scars and ritual markings. Jake handed his rifle to Ayana and began unbuckling his gun belt. Any rules I should know about? Fight until one cannot continue, Cocheta explained. Or until one submit, death not required but possible. Comforting, Jake muttered, pulling off his own shirt. The bite wound from the wolf was still visible on his arm, a reminder of how he and Ayana had met. The two men circled each other in the center of the ring. Nietzsche was larger, more muscular, and clearly more experienced in hand-to-hand combat. But Jake had grown up fighting, had survived saloon brawls and range wars, and most importantly, he had something to fight for, beyond pride. Nietzsche struck first. A devastating punch aimed at Jake's jaw. Jake barely dodged it, feeling the wind from the blow pass his face. He countered with a quick jab to Nietzsche's ribs, but the Apache warrior's body was like iron, barely registering the impact. They exchanged blows, each landing hits that would have dropped lesser men. Jake's lip split, blood running down his chin. Nietzsche's eye began to swell, but neither man yielded. The warriors around them began chanting, a rhythmic drumbeat of voices that seemed to fuel the combat. Nietzsche grabbed Jake in a crushing bear hug, trying to break his ribs. Jake responded by slamming his forehead into Nietzsche's nose, hearing the satisfying crunch of cartilage. The Apache warrior released him, stumbling back. Good. Nietzsche growled through blood-stained teeth. White man have fire, but fire not enough. He charged again, this time sweeping Jake's legs out from under him. Jake hit the ground hard, the air knocked from his lungs. Nietzsche pounced, fists raining down. Jake covered his head and tried to think through the pain. Then he heard Ayana's voice cutting through the chaos. Jake, use his anger. Make him careless. Understanding flooded through him. Jake stopped defending and instead grabbed Nietzsche's wrist mid-punch, using the warrior's own momentum to roll them both over. Now Jake was on top and he didn't waste the advantage. He landed 3 solid punches to Nietzsche's face before the larger man bucked him off. Both men struggled to their feet, exhausted, bleeding, but neither willing to submit. Enough. Cocheta's voice rang out like thunder. Both fighters turned to the elder, chests heaving. Both men prove strength, Cocheta declared. Both men brave, strong, willing to fight for what they believe. First challenge. No winner, no loser. Balance. He looked between them. This good sign. Spirits say both men worthy. Nietzsche looked like he wanted to protest, but the other warriors nodded in agreement with Cocheta's judgment. Custom was custom, and the elder's word was law. Jake limped back to Ayana, who immediately began checking his wounds. Her hands were gentle, but her eyes were fierce with pride. You fight good, she whispered. Like Apache warrior. I fight like an idiot, Jake corrected, wincing as she touched his bruised ribs. But I fight for you. That's all that matters. Cocheta allowed them a brief rest while one of the warriors brought water. Then the elder stood again. Second challenge, test of wisdom. This challenge different, not about strength of body, but strength of mind. He gestured to the painted rocks surrounding the valley. These markings, made by ancestors, tell stories, teach lessons, hold wisdom of generations. He pointed to a specific series of symbols. White man must read these symbols, tell story they contain. If understanding is true, if wisdom is present, challenge passed. Jake stared at the ancient petroglyphs, feeling panic rise in his chest. I don't know how to read Apache symbols. Exactly, Cocheta said with what might have been the ghost of a smile. True wisdom not about knowing everything. True wisdom about knowing how to learn, how to ask for help, How to trust others? Understanding dawned on Jake. This wasn't about him reading the symbols alone. It was about him and Ayana working together, trusting each other. He turned to Ayana. Will you help me? She smiled, and in that smile Jake saw not just affection but respect. Always, she said. Together, they approached the rock wall. Ayana began explaining the symbols, and Jake listened with full attention, asking questions, making connections, understanding not just the literal story of hunters and spirits, but the deeper meaning about community, trust, and the strength found in unity. When they finished telling the story to Cocheta, translating the ancient wisdom into words both Apache and English speakers could understand, the old man nodded slowly. Second challenge passed, he declared. You understand most important lesson, that two people together see more, know more, accomplish more than one alone. 2 challenges down. 1 remained. And as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that the final test would be the hardest of all, because testing the truth of the heart was never simple. The desert air grew cooler as evening approached, painting the valley of painted rocks in shades of amber and deep purple. The warriors built a larger fire in the center of the circle, its flames casting dancing shadows on the ancient stone walls, creating the illusion that the painted figures were moving, alive with ancestral spirits. Jake sat beside Ayana, his body aching from the fight with Naiche, but his mind alert and anxious. 2 challenges completed. But the third loomed before them like a mountain too steep to climb. Cocheta had retreated to speak with the other warriors in hushed Apache, their faces grave and thoughtful. What do you think the final challenge will be? Jake asked quietly. Ayana's expression was troubled. Test of heart always hardest, she said, because heart cannot lie, not to spirits, not to self. She touched the wolf-stone necklace still hanging around Jake's neck. Grandmother once tell Ayana that hardest truth to speak is one we hide from ourselves. Before Jake could respond, Cocheta returned to the fire, his weathered face illuminated by the flames. The old man carried a ceremonial pipe and a small leather pouch. He sat cross-legged before them and began preparing the pipe with deliberate, ritual movements. Final challenge, not like others. Cocheta began, his voice softer now, almost gentle. This challenge require you both to face greatest fear, speak deepest truth. No violence, no symbols, just honesty. He lit the pipe and took a long draw before passing it to Ayana. She accepted it with reverence, inhaled the sacred smoke and passed it to Jake. Jake followed her example, feeling the harsh smoke burn his lungs, but understanding this was part of the ceremony. In Apache tradition, Cocheta continued, marriage is sacred bond, not just between 2 people but between families, between past and future. When woman choose man, she say to world, this person worth more than comfort, more than safety, more than tradition. He looked directly at his daughter. Ayana, you claim white man is yours, but do you truly understand what you sacrifice? What you lose? Ayana met her father's gaze without flinching. Ayana understand, father. Ayana lose family, lose village, lose everything familiar. Her voice wavered slightly but remained strong. But Ayana also lose self if stay, if marry Naiche, if live life others choose. Ayana become ghost, body alive but spirit dead, like sister. Cocheta flinched at the mention of his younger daughter, pain flashing across his face. Sister choose death because she have no hope. Ayana continued, tears now streaming down her cheeks. She see no path forward, no escape. But Jake show Ayana different truth. He show that freedom possible, that choice possible, that love can be chosen, not forced. She turned to Jake, taking his hands in hers. With Jake, Ayana not lose self, Ayana find self. The old man was silent for a long moment, then he turned his attention to Jake. White man, you say you save my daughter from wolves, but can you save her from harder things? From loneliness when white people reject her for being Apache? From hunger when towns refuse to serve you because you travel with native women? From your own fear when responsibility become too heavy? Jake felt the weight of those questions settle on his shoulders like physical burdens. He thought about Daniel, about how he had failed to protect his brother, about the 3 years he had spent running from connection, because he was terrified of failing again. "I can't promise I won't fail," Jake said finally, his voice rough with emotion. "I failed before, failed someone I loved, and it destroyed me." He looked at Ayanna, seeing her fully, seeing the trust in her eyes despite knowing his history. "But I can promise I'll never stop trying. I'll never abandon her by choice. I'll face every challenge beside her even when I'm scared." "Especially when I'm scared," pretty words, Nietzsche interjected from across the fire. "Words are wind, actions are truth." "You're right," Jake agreed, surprising everyone. "Words are cheap, so let me speak truth through action." He reached up and removed the wolf-stone necklace, the most precious thing Ayanna owned, and held it out to Cocheta. "In your culture, this represents the bond between us. If you demand Ayanna return to the village, to Nietzsche, then I'll respect that decision. I'll leave the desert as promised." He paused, his hand trembling slightly. "But I'll leave this with her, so she knows that somewhere in this world, there's a man who saw her not as property, not as duty, not as tradition, but as a fierce, brilliant, courageous woman who deserves to choose her own path," Ayanna gasped. "Jake, no, let me finish," Jake said gently, then turned back to Cocheta. "But if you allow her to choose freely, if you acknowledge her right to determine her own destiny, then I promise you this. I will spend every day earning the trust she's placed in me. I will honor her culture while teaching her mine. I will protect her not by controlling her, but by standing beside her as an equal partner. And if I ever raise my hand to her in anger, if I ever treat her as less than the warrior she is, then I invite you to hunt me down and end my life, because I will have betrayed everything this trial represents." The silence that followed was profound. Even the fire seemed to quiet its crackling, waiting for the elder's response. Cocheta looked at the necklace in Jake's outstretched hand, then at his daughter's tear-stained face, then back at Jake. Slowly, deliberately, he stood and walked around the fire until he stood directly before the couple. "You speak from heart," Cocheta said, "both of you. You not hide behind pretty words or false promises. You acknowledge fear, acknowledge weakness, but also acknowledge strength found in choosing each other." He took the necklace from Jake's hand and, to everyone's surprise, placed it back around Jake's neck. "Wolf spirit brought you together," the old man said. "Wolf spirit knows that true pack is not born, it is chosen. You choose each other." "This enough." Ayanna threw her arms around her father, sobbing openly now. Cocheta held his daughter stiffly at first. Then his arms wrapped around her, and Jake could see the old warrior's shoulders shake with suppressed emotion. "You are free, daughter," Cocheta whispered in Apache, then in English. "You are free." Nietzsche stood abruptly, his face twisted with rage and humiliation. "This is betrayal of tradition. Weakness." He spat at the ground near Cocheta's feet. The other warriors immediately tensed, hands moving to weapons. Such disrespect toward an elder was unforgivable. Cocheta released Ayanna and turned to face Nietzsche, his expression now cold and hard as stone. "Tradition exists to protect people, not destroy them. You want women who fear you, who submit to you, this not strength. This cowardice," he gestured to Jake and Ayanna. "They face fear, face truth, face uncertain future together. This is real courage. This is what makes true warrior." Nietzsche's hand moved toward his knife, and for a heartbeat Jake thought violence would erupt again. But then one of the other warriors, an older man with gray streaks in his hair, stepped forward and placed his hand on Nietzsche's shoulder. Speaking quietly in Apache, whatever he said seemed to break through Nietzsche's rage. The scarred warrior's shoulders slumped, and he turned away from the group. Walking toward his horse without another word, Cocheta watched him go, then addressed the remaining warriors. "We return to village, tell others that Ayanna walk new path. She is no longer of our people, but she carry our blood, our spirit. She will always be daughter, even if she choose different life." Part 8. Where the Desert Meets Forever. The morning after the trial brought a quietness to the valley of painted rocks that felt almost sacred. The Apache warriors had departed before dawn, their horses' hoofbeats fading into the desert silence like whispers carried away by wind. Cocheta had been the last to leave, embracing his daughter one final time with words Jake couldn't understand but felt in his soul. Now Jake and Ayanna stood alone at the edge of the valley, looking out at the vast expanse of territory that stretched endlessly before them. The rising sun painted the landscape in golds and reds, A new day beginning in the most literal sense. What happens now? Jake asked, though he suspected Ayanna had no more answers than he did. She smiled, that fierce warrior smile he had come to love. Now we make our own story, she said simply. No tradition tell us how, no custom guide us, just us. Choosing each day. Jake nodded, feeling both terrified and exhilarated. I've been thinking, he said carefully, about where we go from here. There's a town called Silver Creek. About 5 days' ride west, small place. Not too many questions asked. I worked there once. Know the sheriff, decent man. We could start there. Maybe I could get work at the ranch. You could. Ayanna could what? She interrupted, raising an eyebrow. Stay home, cook, clean, be quiet, Apache wife. Jake's eyes widened. That's not what I meant. She laughed, the sound bright and genuine. Ayanna tease you, Jake. Ayanna know you, not that kind of man. She stepped closer, threading her fingers through his. But we must talk honest. White town's not easy for Apache woman. Even with white husband, people stare, people whisper. Some people worse. I know, Jake admitted. And I won't lie to you, it's going to be hard. There will be people who won't serve us in their stores. Who'll cross the street to avoid us, who'll say terrible things. He squeezed her hands. But there will also be good people. People who judge us by our character. Not by the color of our skin or the differences in our backgrounds. We'll find them. And we'll build a life among them. Ayanna studied his face for a long moment. You really believe this? I have to, Jake said, because the alternative is spending our lives hiding. Running, never settling. I've been running for 3 years. Ayanna, I'm tired of it. I want to build something, put down roots. Even if those roots have to grow in rocky soil. She nodded slowly. Then surprised him by pulling a small leather-bound journal from her pack. Ayanna not tell you this yet, she said, opening it to reveal pages filled with sketches. Drawings of plants, animals, landscapes, all rendered in remarkable detail. Grandmother teach Ayanna about medicine. About healing plants, Ayanna spent years learning, drawing. Remembering, she looked up at him. Vulnerability clear in her eyes. In Silver Creek, maybe Ayanna could help people, share knowledge. Be useful, not just wife, but healer, medicine woman. Jake stared at the drawings, amazed by their precision and artistry. These are incredible, he breathed. Ayanna, this isn't just useful, this is valuable. Towns need healers, need people who understand medicine. The doctor in Silver Creek is old, probably needs help. He looked at her with newfound respect. You're not just my partner, you're going to be the most important person in that town. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. You really see Ayanna this way? Not as burden, not as complication, but as equal? I see you as someone who saved my life just as much as I saved yours, Jake said softly. You gave me a reason to stop running, to face my past. To believe I could be something more than a guilt-ridden drifter. If anything, I'm the burden here. You're the gift. Ayanna threw her arms around his neck, and this time when she kissed him, it wasn't tentative or uncertain, it was fierce and passionate. A claiming and a promise all at once. Jake wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her closer, feeling the rightness of this moment settle into his bones. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing heavily, Ayanna rested her forehead against his. Ayanna, choose you. Jake Morrison, she whispered. Every day, Ayanna, choose you. And I choose you, Jake replied. Every day, every moment, for as long as you'll have me. They packed their camp slowly, neither in a particular hurry to leave this place that had witnessed their transformation. As they loaded the last of their supplies onto Jake's horse, Ayanna paused and looked back at the painted rocks. What are you thinking? Jake asked. Ayanna thinking about sister? She said quietly, wishing she could know that escape was possible, that freedom was real. She touched the wolfstone around Jake's neck. But maybe she know, maybe her spirit guide Ayanna here. Guide you to save Ayanna so her death not meaningless. Jake pulled her close. Her death gave you the courage to run, to fight for yourself. That's not meaningless, that's a legacy. They mounted the horse together, Ayanna settling behind Jake with practiced ease, her arms wrapped securely around his waist. As they rode out of the valley of painted rocks, heading west towards Silver Creek and an uncertain future, Jake felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 long years. Peace, not the peace of forgetting or escaping, but the peace of acceptance of moving forward while carrying the past with honor rather than shame. Daniel would always be part of him. and Ayana's sister would always be part of her. But those losses no longer defined them, no longer caged them, Jake, Ayana said after they had ridden for an hour in comfortable silence. Yeah? When we get to Silver Creek, when we build house, Ayana want garden, she said. Want to grow healing plants, teach others, maybe teach children someday, Jake smiled. Our children? Maybe, she said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. If spirits bless us. If not, maybe we teach other people's children, share knowledge, share love, build family from choice, not just blood. I like that, Jake said. I like that a lot. They rode on through the desert as the sun climbed higher, two souls who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances, bound not by tradition or obligation, but by choice, by respect, by a love that had been forged in fire and tested by ancient trials. Behind them, the valley of painted rock stood silent and eternal, its ancient symbols bearing witness to one more story of courage and transformation. And ahead of them, Silver Creek waited, a small town that didn't yet know it was about to. Welcome a cowboy seeking redemption and an Apache healer seeking purpose. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions, vast and beautiful and dangerous. But Jake and Ayana rode through it together, neither running from their pasts nor fearing their future, just moving forward, one day at a time, building a life that belonged to no one but themselves. And in that choice, in that brave decision to write their own story, they found something more precious than gold, more valuable than land, more powerful than any tradition. They found freedom, they found home, they found each other.